Well, you people that collect records out there, I hope it is less miserably hot wherever you are than it is in Fort Worth, Texas this weekend. So I'm living in the damn Sahara Desert out here, and it's not even summertime. But Joe loves this stuff. He can have it. But enough of that. Let's talk some Paul McCartney, and in particular, let's talk the next album in the list of reviews that I'm doing in order of release, which would be Chaos and Creation in the Backyard, which came out September 13th, 2005. Did all right, got to number 10 in England, got to number 6 in the United States, even though that's the adult contemporary chart, so I'm not sure if that's the actual real Billboard chart or not. But it got to number 3 in France and Sweden, so I guess they liked it there. This was kind of called a return to form again for Paul. It's one of his albums that a lot of people rate really high on his solo album list, and favorite of many, but we'll get into that in a minute. It's produced, this was I think the first album that he didn't have a direct hand in producing in quite a while, produced by Nigel Goodrich, who also produced Beck and Radiohead and other people. Beck and Radiohead not being bands that or people in bands that I particularly ever cared for, even though Radiohead had I guess they had a couple of few good songs there. Uh, but the upside of this is that Goodrich was, from everything that I've read, very honest with Paul. So if he would come in with sort of lazy lyrics or crappy song, he would had no trouble telling Paul that stinks. Go do better. You can do better. Go do better. So that was a big plus on this album. Really cool covers. A picture that his brother took of him back in 1960 or 1959 or something in his backyard of his house where he grew up. So one of my favorite of Paul's album covers. Not my favorite of all time, but one of my favorites. The back of the album is it's a picture of Paul on the list of the songs, so it's good enough as far as those things go. And the inner sleeve has your lyrics, and this rather disturbing and very creepy drawing of Paul there. This is right up there on par with Joe Mean Mr. Mayo's little Twilight Zone Paul doll that he brings out during his chats every once in a while to scare the children away. But that's a kind of disturbing there. So I thought Paul had drawn these, but I think someone else actually did. This is the reissue that just came out. I didn't get the colored vinyl. I just got the black vinyl, but would love to have had a original copy of this, but they go for a fortune. They're like $300 up every time I see one. Had a chance to get one a year or two ago at a reasonable price, somewhat reasonable price, but somebody snatched it up before I got to it, so had to suffice with this. Anyway, this album came out in 2005, like I said, and I had not bought any new Paul McCartney albums between this and Tug of War, with the exception of I bought the Unplugged thing that came out in the 90s for some reason on CD, which was neither here nor there record. It was okay, but not really all that great. And that was a live album anyway. But so I just sort of bought some 45s of some of his hits from his albums between Tug of War and this, but album-wise, it just sort of lost interest after Pipes of Peace and things like that in general. But it was on a message board that I used to visit back in these days, back in 2005, music message board, and a lot of people were on there going on and on about how this is a really great return to form for Paul, really great album, one of his best albums, etc., etc. Even some people on there that generally weren't huge Paul solo fans were impressed with it. So that got my interest up, and I ran out and bought it. Bought it on CD, of course. And at the time, I knew that a lot of albums didn't even come out on vinyl back in those days, so I never thought of it being on vinyl. I wish I would have known. I would have found how to get it on vinyl back then and snatched up about 10 copies of it. But anyway, got it on CD, and I gave it several listens back then, and at the time, I thought this is a very, very pretty, very nice, very well done album, but I thought it was a pretty tedious album too. Nothing really knocked me out. I didn't dislike it. I didn't anything bad that I could say against it other than it just sort of bored me. And I played it several times thinking maybe it'll grow on me. It really didn't. Put the CD aside, and through the years I would take it out occasionally and give it a spin, just see if my opinion had changed. And started to like it a little bit more than I initially did, but not a great deal, and it just took time to grow on me. So I hadn't listened to the CD in forever, but when finally was excited that this was coming out on the reissue on vinyl, like I said, it'd be great to have the original that's worth $300-400, but it's great to have this and finally have this on vinyl. This is really the only Paul album on vinyl I was lacking, with the exception of a couple of greatest hits and live albums and the first two Fireman albums, which also cost an arm and a leg if you can find them, and the Twin Freaks thing. But anyway, so glad to get this on vinyl finally, and I've been playing it because I've been doing these reviews, and been these last few albums have been pretty tough because the early McCartney albums I grew up with and I knew them inside out, and I gave them a few refresher listens before I did the review just to, you know, double check on everything, refresh my memory. But everything from Tug of War up, I've had to listen to for a couple of weeks at least, or week at least, I'm saying, and just to get to know them, because I didn't want to listen to it once or twice and come on and give a review, and that would be unfair, and then may change my opinion down the road. But so I've been playing this for the last week and a half or so, both going to work in the car with the CD and playing the album. So kind of get reacquainted with it, I guess. So what else? Cover's cool, like I said. Let's just get into the songs, and we'll talk a little bit more about some other things when we're in there. So the album starts off with side one and the song Fine Line, which was a single. It was actually made it to number 20 in England and was Paul's last English top 20 hit so far. Didn't do so well here. It only got to number 31, but it got to number 1 in Japan, so I guess they liked it there. It's as far as singles go, it's one thing. It's one of the most upbeat songs on the album. I'll give it that. But as far as singles go, I guess it sort of does what it's supposed to do. It's got a nice pounding piano. It's sort of a halfway between pop and a rock song. Good mix there. I like the song, all right. It just really doesn't go anywhere though. It's good, but it's hardly a classic McCartney 45. This is not Listen to What the Man Said or Jet or Band on the Run or anything like that. It's just not that caliber of quality. But it's catchy and it's good. Actually, the next album, or maybe the album after that, the opening track that I think was a single, is a lot better as far as a McCartney single than this one is. But it's upbeat, it's fun, it's pretty good. It's not great. A little catchy, not terribly memorable. I'm going to give it a 6.5 for Fine Line. Now we get into How Kind of You. This is the second song on side one. I'm guessing he's singing about Heather here. I'm not sure. This kind of has the Nigel Goodrich thumbprint on it. Bits of the song sort of sound like Radiohead music. Bits of the song also remind me of the play-out music at the end of Purple Rain, the great Prince song. It's kind of sedate and low-key song too, but it's okay. I'm going to give it a 6. So that's the thing about most of this album. 99% of this album is very good pop and rock music for grown-ups. It's the tone of the album, a lot of it's rather resigned, a little bit dreary. just not a party album. If you're getting together with friends on Saturday night and the house is hopping, you're not going to grab this and put it on the turntable unless you're tired of the people and want to clear them out of your house. But this is kind of a just thoughtful, meditative, sort of low-key, sedate album throughout, which is not a bad thing. I'm not knocking it for that, but it is lacking in the upbeat for the most part. That's the other thing is I had, for some reason, I'd always thought that by the time this came along, he had dumped Pegleg, but they were actually still married at the time this came out, and so that probably maybe played into a lot of this because I think they got married around 201 or 202, and by this time it's 205. So, I'm thinking that by that time he had pretty much woken up one day and all of a sudden realized, the hell have I gotten myself into? That would probably be my favorite Paul McCartney album cover, by the way. Anyway, what did I give that? I think I gave that a 6 on How Kind of You. Then we come to the third song, Jenny Wren. Love the title, love the name that he came up there with the girl, which is actually a character from a Charles Dickens novel, Our Mutual Friend. I found out, which I had never read that book. I read several Dickens, but I've never read Our Mutual Friend. This is kind of that classic Paul little slice of life bio, snapshot picture of the common man or the common woman in this case, kind of kissing cousin to Eleanor Rigby, Fool on a Hill to some ways. Very, very close to the Ray Davies did that a lot with things like David Watts and Polly. Reminds me also of the great jam song Liza Radley, which is a girl's name and just a little story about a person. Good song. It's not as good as any of the Beatles songs or the Kinks or the Jam song that I just named, but it's up there. It's pretty good, and I like it quite a bit. So I give that one a 7 on Jenny Wren, and love the name, love the title. Fourth song, side one, is At the Mercy, which is a rather morose song, like so many on the album are. This album is kind of Paul at his most forthright, most honest, sort of in John Lennon mode, not really hiding behind a mask like he does a lot, and just sort of being honest and letting the emotions flow. But At the Mercy is just an okay song. I give it a 5. Friends to Go is a song about George, apparently not necessarily about George, but that Paul tried to pretend he was George and write a George song. And it does sound a little bit George-ish. It's not really a word, but it does sound a little bit like something George would have written in a way. Not really sure what he's talking about in the song, but good song. I give it a 7. So 7, yeah. Sixth song on a side one is called The English Tea, and this is Paul McCartney in total Ray Davies songwriting mode, which is neat to see. Very similar to several of the songs on Something Else, the great Kinks album in 1967, in that it kind of could have fit on there. It'd be kind of strange if there had been a Paul McCartney album stuck in there on a Kinks album, but nonetheless, in the vibe, Kinks songs like Afternoon Tea and Situation Vacant and Two Sisters and some of those things that are on the Something Else song and several other Kinks albums too of that period. Anyway, Afternoon Tea, I quite love it. I'm going to give that a 9.6. That's a great song and the high point of the album so far. Song number 6 is Too Much Rain, which I thought maybe was about Linda and Paul missing Linda because she was, 7 years after she had passed away. but it's probably about Peg Leg, Heather. Good piano in it. It's an uplifting message song with downbeat musical accompaniment and feel to it. It's also apparently based on a Charlie Chaplin penned song from City Lights called Smile, which Paul redid the kind of changed the music around and of course lyrics too. Um, it's a pretty good song. I give it a 6.5. So side two we go to and we open with the first song is A Certain Softness. Another Heather song. I'm guessing this album kind of alternates between sort of love songs and I found someone new and sort of, oh my God, what the hell have I gotten hold of here? And she's tipping over again. She's tipping. Grab her, grab her, grab her. Get, you got her. Yep. Everything's okay, everybody. But, yeah, she'll be okay. Don't worry. Just here, just give her a magazine and prop her against the wall there. She'll be fine. She'll be all right. All right. Anyway, so we were talking about Heather. Oh, A Certain Softness, yeah, which I guess was about Heather, or maybe not, but I'm thinking it probably was. Good song. It's kind of a samba ballad thing. Little low key sunshine pop number of just a nice song. I give it a 7. It's a good one. Riding to Vanity Fair is the second song on the side 2. I love the title. I'm guessing it's sort of a Heather Done Me Wrong song. Somebody did him wrong type song. Song's a little plotting, just sort of drags along. It's okay. I think a lot of people like it. I'm just so on it. I give it a 5.5. Third song is Follow Me. Guitar is nice in it. The song's just okay though. It's just one of the songs just sort of there. Nothing much else to say about it because it doesn't really excite much emotion, but it's nice enough that I'll give it a 6. Point out at this time that another good plus on this album is the lyrics make sense. They're very straightforward. They're very seem like honest and written from the heart. You don't get really any silly Paul lyrics or dumb, nonsensical lyrics on this album, and that's a big plus. So we go to song number 4, which is Promise to You, Girl. Love the piano in this. It's kind of fun how the first, 20 or 30 seconds, it sounds like Paul trying to do a Queen song, which is kind of an odd thing, but it's a neat little tribute, I guess, and it's fun. And then it sort of goes off into a more upbeat, one of the more upbeat songs on the album, one of the few upbeat songs on the album. Really good, love the piano, like I said, and it's 8.8 on that song. I like Promise to You, Girl. We go to This Never Happened Before, the 5th song, which is just a languorous, slow-paced song of how everybody needs somebody to reference the old Solomon Burke song, a man needs a woman needs a man, and I could use a woman right now, but we'll talk about that some other time. This Never Happened Before, very slow-paced song, but nice song. I give it a 7. Album sort of ends with song number 6, Anyway, which is a nice song, a pretty song, a nifty enough little song, but it's also a bit dull and depressing of a song. I'm going to give it a 5.6. I like doing those 5.6s and stuff because I know my good friend Joe loves to rate songs that way. It's okay. Kind of a downbeat ending to the album, honestly. But it's not the actual ending because you get a hidden track, which is an instrumental. The album just have silence there for about 20 seconds and it goes into the last song called I've Only Got Two Hands, instrumental. Really upbeat, fun song with a little slow part in the middle, but mainly upbeat. Kind of closest thing to rock and roll on this album, and it's a good chunk of kind of rockin' music to end the album. I give it an 8.4, and I give the album overall a 7.8. So I think a lot of people might rate this higher than that, but for me, that's it has grown on me over the years. But it's also uh, kind of a it's very it's nice to see him in such a open, frank, and honest mood because you rarely see Paul doing that. And sometimes things, even back in the Beatles, I mean, he did things like "For No One" or "I'm Looking Through You" or "Hey Jude," but um, he's usually not that forthcoming the way John was, and so it's nice to see this side of him. But it's a little bit of a slow-paced and a listless album, and it's very good. It's very solid music. It's I got to credit him for this, and it's kind of different from anything he's ever done solo-wise, so I credit that too. But it's one that I think I'll be listening to sometimes, but I don't think I'm going to be grabbing this off the shelf as much as a lot of other Paul albums. I'll put it that way. So that's why the 7.75, I think is what I gave it, or 7.8. Um, and of course, and I forgot to do this with Driving Rain last review of Joe's most favorite Paul solo album, Driving Rain. I forgot to go through all the B-sides that weren't on that album, and I'm not going to do that now, but I will go through the B-sides from this album, and there are 6 of them. I think there's actually 7 because there was one that had a live version of Jenny Wren, but 6 other new songs. And again, it's the case of some really great stuff there that I don't know what the boy's thinking, because a lot of those should have been on this album, or this should have been a double album maybe. But he tucks away these gems on B-sides of singles where they're never going to get any radio play, and nobody's ever going to hear them outside of just super hardcore Beatle fans, and even a lot of them probably never bothered to flip the 45s over and listen to these. But Comfort of Love is a great, give it a 9.6. It should have been the single. It's a better song than Fine Line, to be honest. Which, I mean, again, Fine Line is fine. I don't dislike the song. It's catchy, but it's just not the grab you song. Comfort of Love is a great one and should have been on this album. Should have been a single, probably the lead single. Growing Up Falling Down is another B-side. It's a pretty good song. I give it a 6. Summer of '59 is a really great song. There was a B-side. I'm going to give it an 8.5. This Loving Game. These are all B-sides, so I don't have to keep saying that, but that gets a 7. I Want You to Fly gets an 8.5. That's a really nice, about 5-minute song. And She Is So Beautiful, 7.9 I give it. So a lot of B-sides, and some of them were extras on special version, deluxe editions of this CD and so forth, that really should have been on this album. But 7.75, do like the cover there. We'll be back with the next Paul album in one of these days. So yeah, have a cool weekend and have fun, everybody.